it's taken us many years to build the Singapore we have today. We have an outstanding city, just like football in the Premier League. We are now in the Premier League of cities. It comes with many advantages. We have a very good reputation and are recognized internationally. It also means more competition. Clubs can get into the Premier League one season and the next season they may be relegated to a lower division. So we must not be complacent because in the history of nations, cities rise and fall. We are at a good position to build from our strength, continue to reinvent, readapt, and make the future city of Singapore even better than the one we have today.
Minister, thanks for joining us. In a fast-changing world, what will the future of our city be like?
I would offer three broad areas. Firstly, I think we would want to be a city of opportunities, a city that's connected to others, adding value to the world, and at the center of new innovations. We want Singapore to be the choice location, and by doing so, we can create more opportunities and many more jobs for Singaporeans. Second, I think we want to be an inclusive city, a city for people of all ages, all abilities, a city where everyone has a place to call home, where all can live in dignity and harmony together, regardless of your background, your race, and religion. And thirdly, we would want to be a more resilient city, a city that can adapt to change, a city that would withstand shocks from the external environment, be it economic shocks or long-term challenges like climate change.
Minister, I am very intrigued by the notion of resilience, especially in this particular age where technology has transformed the way we work and live. Being an architect, I'm wondering how do we plan in the light of things rapidly changing, plans maybe making sense today, not making sense 1 year from now, let alone a decade from now.
To add on to that point as well, we have developers who shared that it's so hard to realize their business plans in a prescriptive way, and they have been asking for flexibility in planning for different business users and to accommodate the fast-changing business.
We will need both good planning and long-term plans, but we need flexibility for adjustments on the ground. Flexibility for landowners, for property owners, for developers to adjust to changing circumstances and changing needs. It's not just the planning, the implementation, the ability to adapt to change is critical, and that sense of ownership and commitment from all stakeholders to build the future Singapore is of utmost importance.
The faster the change, the more the reason to plan our future. Because aside from the gestation period, our resources are fairly limited. And different parts of our demography will have different expectations. So perhaps the earlier generation would want some degree of preservation of what they can recognize as home. But the younger generation want to live, work, and play in quite a different environment. And Minister, you said about drawing participation from the community, from people, from designers, from investors. How is that going to take place?
If you look at the projects that we are doing, we are in fact doing a lot more consultation and a lot more engagement with different community groups to realize these projects. A good example is the rail corridor. We are now planning a long stretch north-south rail corridor, which will be kept as a green corridor. And we are looking at different parts of the rail corridor and how we can develop that over time, like the High Line in New York. It's a project which is not just done by URA or by a single government entity, but different groups, designers, architects, but more importantly, the residents who live around that area.
The users.
The users.
I think a future city is not just about having the best infrastructure. It's also about harnessing the soul of the city. What do we stand for? The sense of belonging.
Yes.
And a great sense of wanting to commit to continue to invest in this place in terms of time, talent, and effort. That we should be able to have an excellent hardware, but a soulful software.
That's right. We are not going for the biggest, tallest, or fanciest buildings. We should capitalize on our strengths. And they include our city in a garden, our clean and safe environment, our multicultural heritage, our distinctively Singaporean identity. These are uniquely Singaporean traits. And I think that soul And that sense of identification also means us thinking very hard about how we find the balance between new developments and the rejuvenation of existing places. We'll have to think hard about which are the places we want to preserve, maintain them, keep them the way they are because they are special to us, and foster that sense of emotional connection. A good example is the National Gallery. It used to be the old City Hall. We've kept the building, rejuvenated it, made it into a national museum.
The constant communication of different ideas and let everyone else build upon these ideas, I think that will help create a vibrant ecosystem, which is quite critical in a future city.
Very much so. So another good example I would give is how we are also now doing more place making. I have a neighborhood, but potentially I can close off a road
Yes.
on a weekend so that people can come in, they can participate in activities. We are doing that more and more in different parts of Singapore, and we let groups initiate their own car-free Sunday. If you have a neighborhood or an area that you're living in and like to see more activities and are prepared to do something, we will support you with grants, we will support you with ways in which you can go about doing your programming.
I think we have a good cultural heritage. It's also an asset that we can use when we think of building future Singapore, not just as a place to live, to reflect our roots, who we are, but also how we interact with others. But economic growth is also something that Singaporeans should be proud of, that is part of our culture. We make things work and work well.
In the end, it's about your experiences and memories. It's about the whole experience for many of us in a HDB town. Our HDB towns in the future will be more attractive, convenient, wonderful places where families can bring up children, where they can grow together. The whole HDB town is not just a HDB block by itself, but it's a neighborhood. It's the amenities and facilities where people can interact together. It's the waterways and parks and recreational spaces where you can have people participating and coming together to forge stronger community ties. That whole experience is very distinctively Singaporean, and nothing beats an emotional attachment.
What about iconic buildings? When you think about New York, you think of Empire State Building, you think about Paris, it's Eiffel Tower. What about identity? Do we have one here in Singapore?
I think it's a fallacy to imagine that you could encapsulate an identity in an instance. I think it's a continuum.
Absolutely.
Singaporean identity is a continuous process. I do think that we've always had one, but to concretize it in the built environment is a different task altogether. The traveler of today, especially the millennial, is no longer looking for the landmark icon. The person is looking for a landmark experience. And that comes from neighborhoods. It's not a singular, isolated ivory tower. Singapore has had some success. We have our Dempsey's, Haji Lanes, and Little India is a little bit touristy now. So we have these, but as we develop new neighborhoods, how are we going to create the Sohos, the meatpacking districts of Singapore? Because that's where also the creatives flock to. That's where people want to colonize. We want to experience newness that way. You might go to Paris for the Eiffel, but you also go because the whole Marhe neighborhood is far more impactful as an experience.
Yeah, indeed. I think the young millennials are really looking to own experiences rather than to own assets. They're not looking at the cold hard buildings anymore.
Our city must reflect the spirit of our people. That's essential. I mean, the best cities in the world are defined not by buildings and infrastructure. It's defined by its people. It's about that organic experience in the neighborhood. Our task is to see how we can build distinctive towns in every part of Singapore, not just Little India or Dempsey, but all over Singapore, wherever you are. You will have a place with a different mix of users, commercial, residential. For example, in Jurong Lake District, it's a very nice new area that's emerging. It will be the site of our high-speed rail terminal between Singapore and KL. We have the Jurong Lake Gardens there, which is being revamped. There's beautiful greenery. It will be a new business center and a transport hub as well.
So how can our future infrastructure better facilitate businesses and enable global growth?
We want to create multiple growth centers, not just in the downtown area, but all over our island. Jurong, our first industrial estate 50 years ago, brought in manufacturing, created jobs, and now we are On the next phase with Jurong Lake District, making it a very vibrant commercial center. We can have plans to revitalize different parts of Singapore. We are strengthening our links across land, sea, and air. In the air hub, we are building Terminal 5 in Changi. We are expanding our airport. Imagine Changi Airport today, it's like building another Changi Airport, doubling our capacity. The government's role is to encourage and support, but we need the business owners, land owners, mall owners, mall operators to all participate, to take ownership. We are seeing some encouraging signs.
It's positive that we have so many plans coming up. Are we running out of space because we are still so finite after all? We're digging down under. Are we able to build higher?
We are doing both. Singapore is very small, just more than 700 square kilometers. There are different ways in which we can expand our space options. So you would have heard of the plans for us to move Paya Lebar Air Base to Changi. That space is 800 hectares. That's equivalent to half a Jurong Industrial Estate, one Ang Mo Kio town,
It's huge.
and 2 Tampines regional centers. We are also creating a mega port in Tuas, and all the ports in Pasir Panjang eventually will move over. The space that will be vacated by the ports moving will free up space in the southern waterfront next to our Marina Bay, next to CBD. That space is 3 times the size of Marina Bay today. I'm not saying that we are going to build 3 integrated resorts there, but it's just to give you a sense of scale. We have to plan for not just 5, 10 years, but for decades in the future. A second strategy is to go underground. And I know when I say go underground, people have this conception of all of us living in tunnels, but it doesn't have to be like that. We can have very nice underground designs, which you see in many other cities, connected transport nodes, underground malls, underground pedestrian connectivity. We can also push utilities underground, electrical substations, reservoir drainage systems, or the district cooling system. You can push utilities underground and then free up surface land for better users. We have not reached the limits of many of these developments yet. So I would say we have not reached our physical limits. There's a lot more potential for us to build our city for many more decades to come.
What makes Singapore better than others? We think of Singapore being small, but in quite a number of industries, we actually punch above our weight. Take the Port of Singapore as an example, or the airport here. Our scale is actually quite big. Port of Singapore is second largest in the world.
I think that's a very important point. We can make it happen in Singapore because businesses want to go to places with good infrastructure. They want to go to places which provide a good location for them to attract talent, to do business. They want to be co-located with related companies. We do that already in places like One North, where biomedical science, media, industries there. So that clustering helps businesses. We can replicate that strategy in Jurong, in Punggol, in Woodlands, in Tampines, all over Singapore.
The spillover effect will be equally tremendous as it has done for us in the past. Whether it is creating new business centers or looking after our basic infrastructure, they're very important because it creates the base by which businesses can actually plant their roots and grow from here.
Talking about basic infrastructure, for example, the underground district cooling system that we have in Marina Bay. It's one of the world's largest underground district cooling. District cooling is not new. It's done in many other places. But to do it of this scale, to bring it down underground and to coordinate with all the relevant parties and to create a more efficient cooling solution that will free up surface space, free up rooftop space so that we can have gardens in the rooftop. It's something that we can do in Singapore, and the company that's doing it in Marina Bay has now taken it, exported it as an urban solution to China in Chongqing.
The real estate industry is excited about it with new regional centers coming up, the Jurong Lake District, Paya Lebar, Woodlands. They all want to partake in it. Even the foreign investors, the developers out there are looking keenly on our market. But now, because with the cooling measures, the foreigners are standing at the sidelines, waiting for the right time to come in. So, Minister, what do you think we can do to calibrate the cooling measures such
$10 billion question. On the cooling measure, it's a question I get asked many times. I suppose I'm not surprised that it comes up now. We monitor the property market very carefully, and we are always watching the indicators. The context of it is important because we are now in an environment of low interest rates. We are in an environment of high liquidity, and it's very easy for money to come into any city and raise property prices. You see this affecting all the major cities in the world, which is why housing is not affordable in most major cities.
London, New York,
In-
you couldn't
it's-
afford
But
it.
in London and New York, if you can't afford a home, you can live in upstate New York,
Yeah.
you can go to New Jersey, you can go to the suburbs of London.
They will just rent instead of
Or
owning
you can
a
rent,
property.
but there are options beyond the downtown area, beyond the city. We don't have that luxury. We are city, country, and home. We are just small Singapore, and we don't have that option where people say, I can buy a home elsewhere and then come to Singapore to work. So we do have to ensure affordability of housing. We want a robust, vibrant property market. We want to encourage foreign participation because we want to stay open. These are important characteristics, and we do want to encourage that, but we have to balance against the need for an affordable and sustainable property market. So that's the balance we are trying to strike and achieve.
But you know, the thankful thing is that in spite of the rocketing prices, it affects a segment of properties in Singapore. There's still public housing,
Yes,
right, which
very
is,
much so.
is protected. And
Very
I think
much
it's
so.
brilliant.
Yeah, indeed, in the last few years, HDB has been doing a terrific job. They have been ramping up supplies. The subscription and queuing up rate has declined. That actually helps to relieve HDB resale prices escalation. And with that, the affordability can be better managed.
Yeah.
But affordability is also a function of income growth as well.
That's important because that links back to how we want to build our city. To Chong Meng's point that the economic part of the city development is crucial. If we can build a city that's attractive, with good infrastructure, where companies continue to want to come to Singapore to do more business and grow that business, then there will be more jobs for Singaporeans, there will be more income growth for Singaporeans.
We've had a very good discussion. In closing, we'd like to hear your vision of Singapore as a city of the future.
Singapore should be a place where it's brimming with vitality, opportunities, and a place that has compassion and honor. Everything will fall in place when we have all these values. So it's about inculcating these values through positive and honorable work that we do, not just from the public, but also from the private sector.
Well, from the decades of development, I think as an architect, I have great confidence that the planning and the infrastructure will provide us a very sound, resilient future for Singapore. But what I would love to see is surprise. I would love pockets of Singapore to just surprise me. There's a high level of reliability and confidence that the things that need to be there will be there, but we are all responsible to create that flavor, and I'd love to be just delighted and surprised to see things that you just never imagined you would.
For me, I want a Singapore where my children will be happy to call home. With their heart, have the confidence to be successful and to have more children. And it takes a lot of things, including basic infrastructure.
Well, I hear all your aspirations for Singapore. I think they are shared by many Singaporeans. We want this to be a city of opportunity, teeming with vitality and vibrancy. We want this to be a home for all of us. We want to create opportunities for our young to have a better life. And we want this to be a place where families can anchor their roots here, bring up their children, and call this place home. We have good plans to realize this. These are major long-term plans. They are not going to be achieved in a year or even in a decade. It will take decades. And in a way, this is our chance to build a new Singapore, like our pioneers did in bringing Singapore to where it is today from 50 years ago. When SG 100 comes, we can have a better Singapore than we have today. And it comes down to our spirit. It comes down to the people, because the city reflects the spirit of the people. And great cities are defined by their people. And as Colin says, if we have that spirit of wanting to continually surprise ourselves, innovate, dare to dream of new possibilities in the future, and always keep wanting to do better, then I'm confident that we can make the future Singapore even better than what it is today.
Can we aim for SG 75 so we can be around to see it?
Suggestion.
Yes, we should have
want to see
milestones,
it.
certainly. Certainly.
Yeah, translate our dreams into reality with goals and plans. We will really see it even before 100.
I think you will see many things starting to take shape. Even in 10 years' time.
I
start
think
to
don't wait
do-
for 75.
Yeah,
Every decade is already an achievement.
That's right. So if even, let's say, 10 years' time, 2027, you will start to see the high-speed rail. If all goes well, you can start to see that coming to pass. Jurong Lake District,
Southern waterfront.
Changi Airport. Certainly, you will see the shape of a new Singapore starting to materialize before our eyes. That's a very exciting journey that all of us should be part of in building our future city.
Over the years, Singapore has established itself as one of the most livable cities in the world. We are well known for our well-planned city and connectivity. Our future city must provide a sense of belonging, anchored by strong communities and partnerships. Singapore's transformation will be determined by how we work together to build a future city for all Singaporeans. Thank you for being with us. And thank you all for being part of this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.